Hello, everyone. Okay, so it's time that you learn how to properly use quotations in your writing. And when I say using quotations, you're good at selecting quotations and putting them in, and then you're getting good at the, introducing and explaining. But this is about formatting and how the sentence structure should go to insert quotes into your writing properly. Okay, so there is a notes sheet and worksheet that you will want to follow along with. Okay, here we go. So most of you are doing one of two things. The first one is what I call the drop-in. It's where a quote is simply dropped into the middle of your writing. Or even worse, says, in this quote. You never want to say that, okay? So here's an example from something you should have read last year. Macbeth feels as if life is brief and meaningless. Notice the period. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Shakespeare, 284. He is not ready to die. Okay, so we've got the introduction, we've got the quote, and we've got a little bit of an explanation. But we've got this period. You never want to have quotes hanging out all by themselves as the start of a sentence. Ever, 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 ever. Quotes should not start a sentence. That's called the drop-in, okay? And then we get the drop-in with an explanation, sort of, okay? So the beginning is all the same. Macbeth feels as if life is brief and meaningless, period. Then we have this quote, and then we have life is the candle that goes out. A little bit more explanation there, okay? So this is what you're doing. This is what we need to stop doing. We need to move beyond this, become a little bit more advanced in our writing, okay? So how do we fix it? What not to do. You should never have a quotation standing alone as a complete sentence, or yet worse, as an incomplete sentence in your writing. If the quote itself is not a complete sentence and it's standing alone, bad, bad, bad news, okay? You always want to make it a part of your own writing. So quotes are like helium balloons. If they're not tied down, they float away, and then we don't have anything. The quotation will seem disconnected from your own thoughts and from the flow of your sentences. It's just plopped in the middle, okay? A drop-in. So your sentences anchor it down, okay? So it's not flying free. So there are 4 effective ways to do this. The first is the first and easiest way is not a change, well, not a big change from what you're doing right now with the drop-in. It's simply introduce the quotation with a complete sentence, and then instead of having a period before it, have a colon. And a colon is those 2 little dots, okay? A step up from that, this is a little bit more advanced, is use an introductory or explanatory phrase, but not a complete sentence. And that gets separated from the quotation with a comma, okay? Another step, make the quotation a part of your own sentence without any punctuation between your own words and the words you are quoting. So make it flow. You still use the quotation marks to indicate that this came from the text and you still have the citation, but you write it so that it flows in with your words. Most advanced way to do it is to use snippets. So only a few words as a part of your own sentence. You take out of the big long quote the most important words or phrases, the things that they say so effectively that you couldn't possibly say it any better, okay? And you make that a part of your own writing. So we're going to look at these in detail. First one, complete sentence and a colon. It's the easiest one to remember, okay? Use a complete sentence to introduce a quotation and then have a colon. Be careful not to confuse a colon, which is the 2 dots, with the semicolon, okay? Using a comma in this situation creates a comma splice, and it's a whole bunch of sentence boundary errors. So just think of it this way. If you're using a complete sentence to introduce it, put a colon, then the quote. Done. Okay, a complete sentence with a colon. So here's an example. In Where I Lived and What I Lived For, Thoreau states directly his purpose for going into the woods. Now, most of you would have had a period there, okay? Period right here. But with this, you simply change that to a colon. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came time to die, discovered that I had not lived. Okay? So now it's part of your own writing. It's not a free-flowing sentence. It's not going to float away. It's anchored down by the sentence before it and the colon. Okay, another example. Thoreau's philosophy might be summed up best by his repeated request for people to ignore the insignificant details of life. Colon. Our life is frittered away by detail, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And finally, Thoreau ends his essay with a metaphor. Colon. Time is but the stream I go a-fishing in. Okay. Basic, easy, just simply replacing one period for the colon. Okay. So, next way to do it. Sorry about that. Introductory or explanatory phrase, but not a complete sentence. So an incomplete sentence introducing it. You separate that with a comma. Okay? You should use a comma to separate your own words from the quotation when your introductory or explanatory phrase ends with a verb, such as says, said, thinks, believes, pondered, recalls, questions, and asked, and a lot more. Okay. You should also use a comma when you introduce a quotation with a phrase such as, according to Thoreau. Okay, so here's an example. Notice we're using the same basic and introduction, and we're using the same quotation. We're just altering how it's embedded, okay? And where I lived and what I lived for, Thoreau states directly his purpose for going into the woods, and that's where it ended before. Now we've added on when he says, comma, I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately. Okay, another one. Thoreau suggests the consequences of making ourselves slaves to progress when he says, comma, we do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us. Or Thoreau asks, why should we live with such hurry and waste of life? Okay, or according to Thoreau. That's one of those ones that's not in the list. According to Thoreau, we do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us. All of these are good options. Incomplete sentence with a comma. Okay, so third way that you can do this. You make the quotation a part of your own sentence. This is, again, that step up, without any punctuation between your own words and the words you're quoting. So it's almost exactly like using an introductory phrase with a comma, but instead of saying, he says, you add on the word that. He says that, and then have the quote with no comma. See, pretty simple. That's the basic way to do it, okay? So, hold on. There we go. So an example, same quote, same everything. In Where I Lived and What I Lived For, Thoreau states directly his purpose for going into the woods when he says that I went to the woods because I wished blah, blah, blah. So see here, the comma that came after says has been replaced by the word that. Pretty easy. Okay, or another example. Thoreau suggests the consequences of making ourselves slaves to progress when he says that we do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us. Okay, or Thoreau argues that shams and delusions are esteemed for soundest truths, while reality is fabulous. Okay, and even a step above that is working it into your own sentence without using the word that. And that's what this would look like. According to Thoreau, people are too often thrown off the track by every nutshell and mosquito's wing that falls on the rails. It sounds and flows just like your own words, but it is in quotations, and then you would have the citation there. Okay. The final way, the most advanced way, okay, is using snippets. That's only a few words or phrase from the quote in your own sentence, okay? You don't use any special punctuation that would not be in the normal sentence, okay? You punctuate it just as you would if it was all your own words, okay? Now, here's the thing with this. When you're using snippets, you are both introducing, summarizing, and explaining often in the same sentence where you've worked in these snippets. So here's an example. In Where I Lived and What I Lived For, Thoreau states that his retreat to the woods around Walden Pond was motivated by his desire to live deliberately and to face only the essential facts of life. Now, this introduces it. It summarizes what we're not directly quoting, explains it at the same time. So you're introducing and explaining. I keep getting these pop-ups, my apology. So the snippet there is to live deliberately and the essential facts of life. You choose your snippets because they are said so well or encompass such a broad idea that it would take you either sentences or paragraph to explain the concept. But by using that phrase, it's clear. So integrate it into your own language. Here's another one. Thoreau argues that people blindly accept shams and delusions as the soundest truths while regarding reality as fabulous. Okay? Shams and delusions, soundest truths, fabulous. It's been introduced, it's been explained using the quote. Okay? Now, this is an interesting one. We'll talk about this in a minute. Occasionally, the verb tense that you have been writing your paper in doesn't match the verb tense of the quotation. So when that happens, you are allowed to insert with brackets either a letter or a word, okay, to fix the issue so it flows. So although Thoreau drink is the quote is drink at the stream of time, he can detect how shallow it is. So if you didn't add that S, it wouldn't flow. Although Thoreau drink at the stream of time, he can detect how shallow it is, doesn't work. To match your verb tense, you need that S. So although Thoreau drinks at the stream of time, he can detect how shallow it is. The brackets tell the reader that you've added that S. Okay? So that's the way to get around it, okay? So, punctuation before a quote. There are only 2 punctuation marks that are ever used before a quotation. A colon or a comma, never a semicolon, okay? Punctuation after. There's no citations, if there's no citation following a quotation, the commas, periods, and other end marks go inside the quotation, like this. See the period comes before the quotation mark. If there's a citation following it, which when you quote things usually should be, the punctuation, the period, commas, whatever it is, goes after the quotation. The only exception to this is if it's an exclamation point or a question mark. If it's an exclamation point or a question mark, it would go inside and then you would have a period. The reason for this, if you look up here like this, and then you had, that ends the sentence. The period indicates the end of a sentence, okay? The citation would then come afterwards and be its own sentence. It's not tied to the sentence. Here, like this, the citation obviously refers to like this, and the sentence ends there. Okay? So, let's go back. Here's our original drop-in. Macbeth feels as if life is brief and meaningless. Out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Notice no period. Shakespeare, 284, period. Life is the candle that goes out. Okay? So, you're going to rewrite this drop-in, okay, using each of the different methods. So first, introduce the quotation with a complete sentence and a colon. So that one's real easy. You're just rewriting it with, instead of a period there, a colon, okay? Then use an introductory or word or phrase, but not a complete sentence, separated from the quotation with a comma. Okay? Then you're going to rewrite it again, making the quotation part of your own sentence without any punctuation, and then finally using snippets, only a few words. So the exact same drop-in, same quote, okay, same meaning, you're just going to rewrite it in 4 different ways so that it is properly punctuated and no longer a drop-in. So on your worksheet, you have these there for you, okay, and that is the rest of your assignment. All right, good luck. If you have any questions, pop in and see me during office hours or ask during class. Bye-bye.